Hi guys, it's Debbie and welcome to a new episode of What I Watched This Month. This time everything I watched in the sweltering month of June 2026. There is a lot to cover, so I apologise if I don't go in depth on everything, but I did make quite a few standalone videos this month, so if there is a link I will leave it so there is some more insight into the title. Okay, so I guess I need to kick off with Obsession, the most popular movie of the month and definitely one of the most popular films of the whole year. It's a horror movie in which a guy makes a wish that his crush will love him more than anybody in the world, and it works, but in all the wrong ways, as she becomes violently obsessed with him and things just get worse and worse. I enjoyed the movie. I think both the lead actors, Inda Navarrete and Michael Johnston, were great. There was great character chemistry. There were some incredibly creepy scenes, but I think that's about it. I personally don't agree with this insane, incredibly huge hype about this film. I've read people saying that this is the best horror film of the century. Let's slow down a minute. Now, I know many of you will disagree with me on this, but this month I also watched Backrooms, and I actually enjoyed that way more. I loved the uneasiness of the imagery, the creepy and confusing maze of tunnels the protagonist discovers, the conflicted lead, the monsters. I really don't want to spoil it too much if you haven't seen it yet, but let's just say that I was covering my eyes out throughout a great portion of the film, and that hasn't happened in a long time. Also, I loved how my theatre room started with everybody commenting on what was happening, and then after the first couple of creepy scenes we were all in dead silence glued to the screen. Probably the next most popular movie I watched was The Sheep Detectives. You guys know how much I was looking forward to this film, and I enjoyed it so much I actually watched it twice this month. In this film, a funny bunch of sheep need to figure out the murder of their shepherd, and they do it in the most hilarious ways, while at the same time hitting you with themes of love, grief, what happens after death, the pain, companionship. Just trust me, everybody who said they walked out of this film crying, totally valid. Same with me. Then a massive release this month was Disclosure Day, but which also turned out to be a massive flop, although it was directed by Steven Spielberg, who returns to the alien genre, who he is so fond of. But the marketing of this movie promised a deep analysis of our small position in the vast universe, faith in humanity being put to the test. Scrap all that, it's a bog standard action sci-fi movie, but with awful CGI. Then probably my favourite film of the whole month was Blue Heron, which I'd been looking forward to for such a long time. I spoke a few months ago about my struggle with the bittersweetness of life, of the concept of growing up and moving forward, trying to come to terms with the fact that the more you love, the more you suffer, and how this was making me appreciate films like Train Dreams. And Blue Heron does exactly that. It's this touching story of a family dealing with a troublesome teenage son, mostly seen through the eyes of the younger daughter, who as she grows up realizes many of her memories and perceptions are starting to shift. Just watch it, it's beautiful. Another movie I unexpectedly enjoyed was I Am That Girl, a very little known movie starring, of all people, a very young Pedro Pascal. It presents itself almost like a Y2K girly pop movie about a pretty materialistic party-going woman who befriends a man who is the complete opposite of her. I wasn't expecting it to take such an emotional turn, and it had me in tears by the end. I then watched or rewatched in some cases some older horror movies, so bear with me as I cover these together. First of all, I watched The Blob, the 80s remake of the story of this alien-like substance that basically it takes over an entire town, eats everything that's in its way. Because of how we think of vintage effects, I didn't expect this to be very realistic, but it was absolutely disgusting and terrifying on the level of The Thing or The Fly. Some scenes genuinely made me squirm. I also found out it stars Shawnee Smith, who years later played Amanda in the Saw movies. Another similar 80s horror movie I watched was Fright Night, but I'm pretty sure I'd already seen this movie, but I could just remember the most famous scenes. In this movie, a young man starts suspecting that his neighbour could be a vampire, which he is, and this discovery leads him right into the vampire's hands. This film has more of a dark humour vibe, with some scenes leaning into even slapstick, but I'm not sure whether that was intentional at the time. I then watched Night of the Living Dead, the 90s remake, which basically throws you into the zombie horror within not even minutes from the beginning of the film, and then just never stops. I once watched a video where someone explained how horror movies often make us forget how traumatizing these situations would be in real life, but this film really captures that through the actors' faces and reactions and lines. there are many moments of absolute despair. Then I watched Wolf, starring Jack Nicholson as a man who is bitten by what he thinks is just a normal wolf and then transforms into a werewolf and starts acting violently in his real life. It affects his work and relationship, and things only get worse from there. Now, this isn't a particularly exceptional movie. I personally found Jack Nicholson to be more frightening when he was in human form rather than when he transformed, especially in the scenes involving power dynamics at work and conflicts with his wife, rather than when he's a wolf. Also, it felt odd seeing him nearly 60 jumping around staircases and other parkourish stuff. Now, moving away from the older horror movies, this month I watched In the Hand of Dante, one of the most chaotic films of the last months. It stars basically anybody you can think of in Hollywood who wasn't filming The Odyssey at the time, in a dual storyline where Oscar Isaac plays both Dante Alighieri in the 14th century and a modern Dante expert, drawn into a mafia conspiracy involving a manuscript of the Divine Comedy. It was such a mess, so chaotic, with too many accents and languages without cohesions, actors playing multiple characters, unnecessary cameos. I get that there was an interesting vision, but it just didn't work out. Another disappointing movie was Tatami, which had really caught my attention a few years ago when the first trailers came out, but it turned out to be very different from what I expected. In this film, an Iranian judo athlete is pressured by the Islamic Republic to fake an injury and step away from the world championship she's taking part in, creating moral conflict about the choice of whether to continue or to stop and the consequences that this could have on herself and her family. The topic does start off strong and the lead acting is great, but then it gets lost in a timeline that doesn't make much sense. There are plot holes, the threat fades into something progressively more unrealistic. I really wish I could have enjoyed it more after keeping it on my watch list for such a long time. I then watched Is God Is, about two twin sisters who were left badly scarred in a fire as kids, something which affected their whole life, until one day they get the chance to confront the person responsible and set off on a chaotic journey, meeting all sorts of characters. The narration is very poetic, quite literally, and there is never a moment of boredom because the film keeps throwing new people and situations at you. I then watched Hush, which on paper seems like the kind of manipulative psychological thriller I would really enjoy, but it stars an incredibly stiff Gwyneth Paltrow as a woman whose life gets thrown into chaos when she moves in with her mother-in-law, played by Jessica Lange, who is incredibly possessive, manipulative, and against her from day one, and seemingly obsessed with the baby she's pregnant with. Jessica Lange instead is such a scream queen. She was absolutely terrifying in all her coolness and her elegance. She reminded me a bit of some of her roles in American Horror Story, but the rest of the dynamic lacks character chemistry. There's ridiculous situations fizzle out, and characters seem to suddenly go blind where things are happening clearly in front of them. I then watched Priest, a action horror religious dystopic movie I'd never heard of. To be fair, the opening sequence, the world building and imagery are very intriguing. It felt like a blend of Blade Runner 2049, I Am Legend, Mad Max, Legion, set in a devastated world where a priest is hunting vampires and other enemies to find his niece. It feels like it wanted to be a Constantine type film, but it never had the depth, the dialogue or narrative to be anything beyond just the aesthetic. Another movie I watched this month, which I felt put aesthetics before substance, was Saccharine, and I'm now realizing the disproportionate number of horror movies I watched. It's about a woman who uses a horrific and illegal substance in order to lose weight. In my review, I said I wouldn't be surprised if people tried something like this in real life, until the protagonist realizes she is being haunted by what she consumes. And the last film of the month was one of the campiest, craziest sci-fi movies I'd seen in a long time, Freaks of Nature. In a world in which aliens reach planet Earth, but that's just the cherry on top of a society already divided between humans, zombies, vampires. It's total chaos. They straight up slapstick, high school humor, over the top gore, American Pie level love stories, and you're definitely not prepared for the number of famous actors in the cast. And with that, we have reached the end of this month. Now I would love to hear what you've been watching, what you loved, what you hated, what you think of the titles I mentioned today. Let me know everything with a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.